Is the US driving its closest allies into China's arms? Trump's mammoth 145% tariff sledgehammer against Beijing has backfired spectacularly. While China responded with a swift 125% counterpunch, something far more dangerous is brewing. Canada and European powers are quietly calculating their escape routes from Washington's economic orbit. The unthinkable question arises: are we witnessing the beginning of a historic shift in alliances that could permanently redraw the global power maps? Join us as we follow the money, expose the backroom diplomatic deals, and reveal why this trade war could cost the US far more than anyone predicted. This is Globe Lines, where world-changing political currents happen in real time.
China is digging in. Americans are waking up to a whole new escalation in the global trade war. We're actually hearing from the Chinese President Xi Jinping himself. Xi's saying that his nation is, quote unquote, not afraid.
Anxiety has really weighed heavily on Wall Street. You've seen it these last several days. Stocks are just struggling to end the week in the green, just hours after China made its latest move in the trade war.
Power and chaos when tariffs throw the engine off track. Trump's latest tariff blitz was designed to corner China, but instead, it set off a chain reaction that's disrupting global markets at every turn. On April 2nd, the administration rolled out sweeping tariffs targeting everything from semiconductors to industrial chemicals, peaking at a staggering 145%. The official reason? National interest. The result? Absolute market chaos. Wall Street lost billions in value, oil prices took another nosedive for the second week in a row, and Asia's major stock indexes suffered their worst plunge since the 2008 financial crisis. But the financial hit was just the opening act. In a swift and calculated response, China fired back with a blanket 125% tariff on all U.S. imports and sent a clear signal to the European Union. It's time to push back against Washington's strong-arm tactics. President Xi's diplomatic strike hit Brussels hard and sent ripples across Europe. His message was clear: there are no winners in a tariff war. Put simply, if you're with the US, you're signing up for economic turmoil. Now, traditional allies like the EU and Canada are rethinking their positions. For the EU, Trump's hardline approach has eroded trust, while for Canada, it's a signal to reassess its decades-old supply chains to avoid becoming collateral damage. Both are exploring new trade routes, and China, once seen as a competitor, is starting to look more like a potential partner. But if these longtime allies are starting to change lanes, what's driving the shift? Let's take a closer look at who's pulling ahead and leaving the US in the dust. Canada and the EU apply the brakes to trust. Trump's tariffs have sent shockwaves beyond China, rattling the economies of North America and Europe. The EU and Canada do more than $1 trillion in annual trade with the US, $700 billion and $300 billion respectively, but now feel more like targets than partners. In Canada, hopes for post-Biden stability have evaporated. Although energy exports, oil, LNG, hydroelectricity, have traditionally flowed to US markets, Ottawa is pivoting eastward. Plans for new pipelines, LNG facilities, and long-term Asian and European trade agreements are gaining momentum. The strategy: diversify trade routes, stabilize revenues, and prevent future Washington-induced disruptions. Public opinion strongly supports this reorientation away from U.S. dependence. Nearly 60% of Canadians support building infrastructure for trade beyond the U.S. Across the Atlantic, Germany, France, and Italy are growing increasingly frustrated with U.S. tariffs on automobiles, agriculture, and technology. Internal EU documents reveal strategies to reduce trade dependence on the U.S. while strengthening ties with China. President Macron dismissed Trump's 90-day tariff pause as merely symbolic before the inevitable new trade barriers. The core issue is trust, which is rapidly eroding for both Canada and European nations. The once solid foundation of North American and transatlantic trade is destabilizing, with potentially enormous costs to repair these fracturing relationships. Before we dive in, do us a solid, hit that like and subscribe button. It keeps Globe Lines going strong and helps us connect with more informed viewers like you. With that out of the way, let's move on to our next part: China's tactical shift to take the lead. China isn't wasting any time navigating the space left by escalating U.S. trade tensions. President Xi's diplomatic outreach from Spain to Saudi Arabia signals that Beijing is focused on the long game, and so far this approach is paying off. The EU and Canada are beginning to warm to China's overtures. With Beijing now controlling key supply chains, rare earths, solar components, and EV batteries, European automakers see expansion in China as a smart way to hedge against U.S. instability. Many are already ramping up operations to avoid being caught in future tariff crossfires. Meanwhile, Canada is eyeing China as a new destination for its energy exports, with nearly $100 billion in oil and gas revenues at stake and U.S. trade flows under threat. Canadian officials are now exploring long-term agreements with Chinese buyers that offer steady, large-scale demand. While there are concerns, China's human rights record and intellectual property issues remain major sticking points. Pragmatism is winning out over politics in the world of trade. The new game plan: diversify, reduce dependence on any single market, even if it means aligning with a competitor. And if the U.S. doesn't rethink its approach soon, it could see its position weaken even further. Let's take a closer look. Is the U.S. trade dominance eroding or evolving? The billion-dollar uncertainty. Can the U.S. maintain its position as the world's trading hub? Trump says yes, but Wall Street and U.S. allies aren't so sure. Analysts have warned that even a 5% annual decline in trade with the EU or Canada could cost the U.S. hundreds of billions over the next decade. As factories move, pipelines are rerouted, and long-term contracts are shifted overseas, the U.S. grip on global trade is slowly loosening. Fears of a recession are rising rapidly, with Goldman Sachs now putting the odds at 45%, all driven by the ongoing tariff fallout. The 15% decline in the S&P 500 since February suggests a market driven by fear rather than momentum. Trump's supporters argue that tariffs are simply a negotiating tactic, but global partners are starting to see through that. Meanwhile, China's message is clear: we're reliable. While it's far from a hero in the eyes of the West, Beijing is increasingly seen as a stable trading partner, one that honors agreements and delivers on volume. Even if the U.S. isn't completely left behind, the pivot to China is already underway. And if Washington keeps changing its strategy mid-race, allies may start to pull away, not out of spite, but out of necessity. So, how does all this fit together? And what does the home stretch look like? Let's break it down. Final call: the tariff backfire. Did Trump's move backfire? Trump's aggressive tariff strategy may have set off a chain reaction that could ultimately backfire on the U.S. economy. What started as a tough stance against China has now prompted traditional allies like Canada and the EU to explore stronger trade ties with Beijing. The real surprise? This quiet shift could reshape the future of automotive supply chains, EV battery sourcing, and global energy routes. Even without a dramatic split, the gradual trade realignment could siphon billions from the U.S. economy and give China an even more influential role on the global stage. In its attempt to isolate Beijing, the U.S. may have inadvertently set the stage for its own isolation. For many of its allies, diversifying trade options isn't just a smart move. It's becoming a necessity for survival. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Canada and the EU will actually make a real shift towards China, or is this just part of their negotiating strategy? Are Trump's tariffs a stroke of tactical brilliance, or an economic misstep? And how will these changing trade dynamics affect the global auto industry? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to Globelines, your ultimate stop for global shifts, trade trends, and the big picture in geopolitics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to check out the next video on your screen. There's plenty more on the way.